Ladies and gentlemen, may I please have your attention? If I may request everyone to be seated, take your seats and be settled, please. We're about to begin in a second. If there's anyone still making their way to the venue, please hurry up on inside. We're about to begin in the next few seconds. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed your lunch. I'll give you a few seconds to please take to your seats and settle down. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last call to please take to your seats. If I may please have your attention, please. May I ask you to take to your seats and we may begin with our next session. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully you have enjoyed your lunch and you have filled your bellies. If you didn't try the beef stew, you missed out. This whole day went to waste. Hopefully you got your beetroot and you got your beef stew. Then your day is complete. So hopefully you did enjoy that delicious, scrumptious lunch we just had. But we're about to move on to our next session right now, and this is another one of those very much spoken about, I think, since the beginning of this morning, in as far as our theme is concerned of safety, security, and sustainability in aviation. So we continue, of course, to embrace digital transformation as well as connectivity in aviation. However, we cannot have this discussion without talking of that buzzword of cyber security, because an increasingly view that we see is that it's quite a vital component of aviation's operations. So our next panel delves into the evolving cyber threat landscape within the industry, the potential risks as well as vulnerabilities in the system, as well as the measures that one can take, or industry can take rather, to enhance the cybersecurity posture. So I'd like to also challenge you to please ask some questions and engage. It's all about making sure that you leave here fulfilled and satisfied with where conversation is going, so that next year when you have another feedback session, it's all positive because you've exhausted all the questions and concerns that you might have had, particularly with this topic. So hopefully this discussion will challenge you to think a lot more critically about the impact of cybersecurity within aviation operations, towards passengers, as well as the entire aviation ecosystem. So I will not be moderating this panel. Key experts will be delving into this discussion, of course, led by the moderator for this panel discussion, and I'd like you to please help me welcome onto the stage AVSEC Risk Specialist at the SA Civil Aviation Authority, Mr. Given Shingange. Thanks, Given. No, you can't. Let me get your roving mic. Team, do we have a roving? Keep trying, Given. Try again, Given.
This is when the nervousness kicks in. Am I audible now? Yeah. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say that when we got here, there was a podium with those two things that the president used to speak. And I said, today it's happening. But I think I'm not that liked, because they are what, teleprompters, right? Or yes, I was looking forward to it because I've seen President Barack Obama using it and others, But I've lost out on that one. In the next event, please, guys, leave it on just for me. I would really appreciate that. Good afternoon again, board members, DCA. Colleagues from the DOT, and I say this because the DOT is the one that signs off on our budgets eventually somewhere. CAA executives and senior managers, the managers and the frontliners. As a military guy, the frontliners are the inspectorate. They are at the cold face of this whole thing. And again, of course, the inspectorate deals with the the industry, and welcome to all of you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this session. Now, the cybersecurity topic, and I'm sorry for putting my hand in the pocket because this is how I was told that I must act when I'm nervous. I'm not disrespecting you at all. I'm just nervous. So if you want me to take it out, then it's at your own risk. Anyway, my name is Given Shingange, and as I've been introduced and you would have seen on the website, I'm the Aviation Security Risk Specialist, also doubling as the Aviation Cybersecurity Specialist. At one of our recent events, the DCA was speaking there, and she spoke about the acronym VUCA, which stands for Volatility, Uncertainty, Complexity, and Ambiguity. Now, this is an acronym that was coined in the 1980s. Some would say 1985. The 1985 one would be said that it was coined by a professor. The 1987 one, which obviously would become more popular, you will see that it would have been coined by the US Army. I believe the 85 one, right? So when you talk about VUCA, you could easily think that we need to now look at how the environment lately, there's a lot of volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, right? Now, what we have now, there's a new one, DC, I don't know if she's here, but I'm sure she will be told, but there's one called BANI now. BANI talks about it's brittle, anxious, nonlinear, and incomprehensible. So this is the kind of spaces that we are in. For instance, the murkiness between warfare and peacetime, the murkiness between who's the enemy combatant and who's not. You might be doing that which you've been doing for many years, but only to find that somebody else somewhere uses that to cause chaos. You know, we now have drones that you approve a drone for agricultural use, and someone decides to add a dual-use purpose to it and uses it somewhere else. I mean, we know what happened recently in the Middle East. Now, Program Director, I must confess, though, that I'm talking about the VUCA part, and obviously referring to the DCA having made a speech recently, because currently at the CAA, we are busy with performance reviews. So I'm hoping that when I mention the DCA and mention that I was listening, all these ones, my colleagues were not listening. I was listening. The DCA mentioned VUCA there, so if at all someone was thinking of giving me a lower mark, I think this gives me a better mark. Now, if you think of the whole space of cybersecurity, you can, again, like I said, the VUCAs and the BANIs, from a corporate side point of view, now think of it from a national security point of view. It means the volatility that you talk about, the uncertainty that you talk about, the Geneva Conventions of this world where you talk about prisoners of war or the declaration of war. Warfare in terms of a concept has changed because for us to have warfare, you must declare. And if you declare, it means it's a country state to state. But lately, you have non-state actors. But what is even more interesting is that today you have, obviously, cyber-enabled operations, influence operations, and all these other operations. So it's no longer that easy to see who's who, right? Now, I want to maybe even talk about some of the oldest technologies from an inventions point of view and an industrial revolution point of view. Many years ago, obviously, when the rail was invented, even then, there was a way of military men operating and how they would do their strategy and plan. But the rail, which at the time would have been invented just to move goods and people, some decided to use it first in advancing to the enemy. So they disrupted the planning process of the enemy, and therefore, I think this was during the Napoleonic Wars, and the rest is history. Another interesting one, which I think we'll talk about, is the invention of the telegram. The invention of the telegram, again, just the technology, someone inventing this thing. But what was happening in the past is that young men would go to war, and the families would only see that they've lost their loved ones when they come back. So you stand there, and then they come back, you're like, yo, Given is not here, and then you start crying, right? But when the telegram came in, what happened is that the telegram made it possible for communication between the generals in the front line and the government at the back to get more resources and all that. But what it also did is that it made it possible for the civilians and the mothers and whoever at home to actually take part in this warfare, which means When you now saw newspapers and whatever was written saying that the people are now dying out there, then they would pressurize the governments out there. Now, this thing of misinformation, disinformation, and all the other things are very old news, just like propaganda. So what has also happened with such inventions is that, again, they sort of made it difficult for us to tell who's who. It led to the experts, the academic documents that were written with the intention of getting us to think in a particular way. This is why today we talk about influence operations. The decisions we make are based on what we have access to, what we've subscribed to, and all these other things. I tried to talk to Gemini and ChatGPT about how to be a good moderator. I think I ran out of data, so if I don't moderate the way I should, it's because I did not get there yet. But anyway, program director, like I said, we have this cybersecurity, which is a very popular concept, just like, what is this thing? The industrial 4IR. And somehow it died down. We're no longer talking about it, right? As if we already sorted out. Now we have a situation now where we have new technologies, AI, big data, this biometrics. Airports are becoming smart. Connectivity, the conveniences. You get to the lounge and then you can be connected and you share whatever you share. You're waiting, so you work there. But all these conveniences, they come with the disadvantage. And this is why we have this talk today. Just a quick share with us in terms of what we do. We're part of the working groups from an ICAO point of view, and these things are discussed there at length. And maybe if I may share that we are still trying and sort of trying to understand the threats and risks because they're evolving. Those who are okay today, when the enemies or the attackers advance, they make it difficult for them to operate. So it's a continuous conversation. What is also interesting about it is that it's no longer the us and them. Government can't say, we tell you what to do, because in the main, the private sector is the one that's dominating the space. So it brings with it this complexity that we now have to rethink and relearn how to operate and interact with each other. Now, with that being said, but I just want to when you don't quote someone, you are not, you must just go on the internet and say a good quote for a conference. And you get that and you say it and people think you're smart, right? Right? I want to quote the futurist Alvin Toffler, who says, and I quote, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And I think it's very important to use this as something to get into this conversation. Now, join me in welcoming the panelists, because I think this is what Gemini or ChatGPT would have said. It would have said, oh, wake up, it's not your thing, you're just the moderator, right? Now, we have Dr. Irene Mwetsana-Moeng, who is from the State Security Agency. Now, the reason we invited Doctor is because based on the National Cybersecurity Policy Framework, the state security is the one that has to coordinate anything that has to do with cybersecurity in the country. And obviously, the Defense Force has to do the Defense Force side, right? So she's here, she's a DDG at the State Security Agency, in charge of the national communications. And she'll obviously share with us she'll make a presentation, and then the panelists will then discuss and deal with questions after that. Dr. Irene, please come. I did say to the panelists that, can they just sit down so I can shine and I'll call them. I can't have them here. I can't have them here clouding my space. So they must come one. We also have Dr. Tunzelana. What is interesting about Dr. Tunzelana is that as much as here with us on the ground. And we know that we have a lot of infrastructure as the aviation space that is in remote areas. So she's very much into that space. Now we also have, real estate, right? You have a house, you have commercial property and stuff. We also have Mr. Molehewesi. Mr. Molehewesi, I nearly said doctor, but he's busy with his PhD, so it's fine. He is in charge of what you would say is the digital real estate of the country. Now, anything that says .za, as a regulator, he is the guy who has to make sure that we are safe. So your banks are .za, anything that is .za, if he does not regulate it, come, Chief. If he does not regulate it properly, then we have a problem. So we called him because then we get to understand this space, this cyber space that we are dealing with. We also have Doreen Mokwena. Doreen, the first thing that I want to say is that I follow her on social media, and she's always invited and given awards. And I wanted to shy away from saying, yeah, the first black woman this and that, because she is just a cybersecurity expert, an ethical hacker, a software developer. Doreen, please come. She runs, she's the founder and CEO of Cyber Sec Clinic. And
I had to tell them I'm a hacker.
No, yeah, well, at least I know hackers. So she is one of the top 5 leading women on the continent when it comes to cybersecurity. So we make sure that we get the right people. Wes, you did not get the clap of hands, Grootman. I'm worried. Who's my last one? Who's missing?
Simon.
Who?
Simon.
Simon.
No.
The reason Simon is missing is because it's possible that he left. So Simon works for the TransUnion, right? And he did warn me not to say too much about TransUnion, and chances are he will not be able to share much. Some of you who know what happened to TransUnion recently and Medium recently, you would know that it would be very interesting to get to know what happened. TransUnion, all of us are there. Whatever we apply for, our details are there. Right? Come, Simon, they want to see you. But with Simon, TransUnion was hacked twice. Ne? Allegedly. Firstly, the ransomware attacker said, we want 218 million. Simon said, no, maybe not him, but someone there. And they said, okay, we'll come back. And they said, late last year, they said, no, give us 1 billion. Now, this is what happens when you deal with a ransomware attack or when you don't do what you need to do to close down your systems. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is the panel. And what we're going to do now is to allow Dr. I, aka Dr. I, to give us an address, and then we are going to engage. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon.
Is it on?
Am I audible? Oh, thank you. It's not easy with the lights, but anyway. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me, Given in particular. And I'm actually honored to be here. I was telling Given because he used to work with me, but he didn't know that I started my career in the aviation industry. I can see faces that I was with at the time. So he was actually shocked. So I'm pleased to be here. But today I'm looking at the cyber threats that we are facing as a country and the cyber incidents that we are facing. Our nation, meaning the government, the private sector, critical infrastructure, universities, non-profits, you name it, citizens, we are being attacked every day, every minute, or there's always an attempt of a cyber attack. And these cyber attacks are against our nation and are designed to evade the defenses that we put up. And they are exploiting the weaknesses that we have in our capabilities, in our capacities, in our coordination or lack of coordination thereof, in the inadequate regulatory framework that we have. There are weaknesses in our national security structures and these weaknesses are being used against us. So we need to develop an integrated cyber capability and capacity that is networked to collaborate or networked approach to collaborative defense and intelligence analysis. That includes the sharing of information between ourselves as government and between government and private sector. So our current state, when we did an assessment, we completed our cyber maturity assessment last year. It turned out that as a nation, we are reactive. There are some instances where we are just ad hoc, but on average, we are reactive. So we are not proactive as a country. Our private sector is better in the sense that it's more mature. The government or the public sector has not reached that stage yet. So in today's interconnected digital landscape, cyber attack threats loom more prominent than ever. They are sophisticated, getting more complex by the day. Now that we are having emerging technologies like your AI now actually performing these cyber attacks, it becomes even more complex. And as a country, we are not even there yet. So it means organizations must proactively safeguard their digital assets and sensitive information. We can't protect everything. We should be able to identify our crown jewels and then at least focus our resources on the digital assets that we have identified as critical. We need to partner. We can't do this thing alone. Cybersecurity is huge. It affects all of us. So we can't do it on our own. We have to partner. So collaboration is quite important. The sharing of information is very important. So can we confidently answer these questions? Where should we focus and prioritize? Do we have the data to demonstrate effectiveness or where we need improvement? So as we get these cyber incidents, as we respond to the cyber incidents, do we have a repository where we are putting this data so that we can analyze this data and be able to learn from it? Are we able to have that repository so that out of it we can have our situational awareness as a country and be able to plan better in an informed way? Can we scale our resources when needed? Do we have the capabilities to successfully detect and stop attacks? Do we know the threats and how they attack us? Because usually I see we always look at cyber intelligence, cyber threat intelligence, which is information that you gather from technologies that you buy. But does it really mean that these are the cyber threats that you have to be worried about, that you are facing? Or are we defending ad hocly, if there is such a word, when there is a threat that is a global threat that we assume that it's also a threat that is coming to us? So those are some of the questions that we have to ask ourselves. So if we look at the top 5 threats in Africa, ransomware is one of the biggest, in particular in our countries, the lockbit one that is there. And this has got a double-edged sword, and now it has a triple one. I think the example that was made from TransUnion. So it doesn't only exfiltrate your sensitive data, but it also encrypts your files. And then there is extortion, asking you for money so that you can be able to have access to your files. But now we have also seen another trend where the data that has been exfiltrated in one incident is being sold in the dark web, and another bad actor one day uses the same one to come and extort money from the company to say, hey, I have your information. If you don't want me to expose you, give me the money. So that is one of the serious ones that we really need to look into as a country. There is business email compromise. This is a common one as well. Online scams, digital extortion, and botnets. What are these factors that are influencing the cyberspace? It's the digital divide and poor access to technologies, technology advancements and emerging technologies, the education and awareness, the cost of cybersecurity. And I know as a country we have the triple challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And there is a question that, do we really need to invest in cybersecurity when we have these big challenges? So that's one of the questions that are out there. Where would you put the money to alleviate poverty or invest in cybersecurity? Our dependence on foreign technologies. As a country, we are consumers of technology. We are not manufacturers of it. So it's another inherent risk that we have. The crypto mining, the geopolitics, we have seen with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we are seeing it with Israel and Gaza. So the technologies that we are using that are manufactured in Israel, if there is a conflict between Israel and another country, and the other country has got the capability, they will be focusing on those technologies that are developed in that country. And you might find that your organization is one of those companies that are using such technologies. The digital foreign influence and the jurisdiction with regards to cyber offenses, the laws, the policies, the standards, and with the increased connectivity of people and devices to the internet, this has created an expanded attack surface, and the nation states and their proxies, transnational criminal organizations, and cyber criminals, they continue to use sophisticated and malicious tactics to undermine critical infrastructures. So the top cyber threats within the public sector, it's ransomware, data loss, phishing, the inside threat, the hacking, the website defacements, the misconfiguration. The supply chain threat, we are seeing it decreasing, but it was there. And the common causes of these cyber attacks within the public sectors are the aging technologies. And the reasons for aging technologies could be not enough investment in technologies, also the long processes that we have to go through in the public sector when you have to procure technologies. It also has an impact on the replacement of the aging technologies. The limited skills, and the limited skills is not only in the public sector, it's a global problem. The reliance on third parties. The reliance on third parties could be a result of limited skills, or it could also be the result of our dependency on foreign technologies. Failure of business continuity plans, the inefficient data loss prevention, and the lack of patch management strategies. So if Microsoft releases on a Tuesday, it means Wednesday is the exploit Wednesday, because once a patch is out, the bad actors are already waiting for those who haven't patched. and our inadequate regulatory and legislative framework. Now, coming to the aviation industry, the digitalization of aviation has also led to increased cyber vulnerabilities in your flight control systems, passenger data, and overall airport cybersecurity. The A&D cybersecurity is a critical component in maintaining flight safety, national security, and the data integrity for millions of air travelers. The airline cyber attacks have highlighted the need for a robust aviation information security measures and frameworks. And again, the collaboration between the government, industry, regulators, and all stakeholders is crucial in maintaining a resilient aviation cyber ecosystem. The best practices for aviation cyber threat mitigation will include risk assessments, advanced security technologies, and operational continuity strategies. And aviation sector faces a multitude of evolving cyber threats, which include, we mentioned before, the flight data and control systems, the stealing of passenger information, we have seen it with the BA incidents, and manipulating airline operations. So the widespread adoption of applications for flight operations and customer services has further expanded the threat landscape. And to defend against these increasingly sophisticated threats, a robust framework tailored to unique needs of aviation cybersecurity is of paramount importance. I've always seen the aviation industry as one of the delicate industries. Once they are disrupted, I heard this morning we were talking about sustainability. I think because I'm one of the victims of the disruptions of 9/11. It wasn't a cyber attack, but it was an attack. So the sustainability of this industry, it's very, very important, and it's a very delicate type of industry, which I think it's very important to put all the resources and investment on cybersecurity. The common cyber threats in this industry is hacking into flight control system, stealing sensitive passenger information. Remember, you keep your millions and millions of data when we do our reservations with our credit cards. So that's the type of data that these bad actors are looking for. Manipulating airline operations and the impact of that on the safety of an airline. Malware infiltration and sabotage and insider threats. And the impact of cyber attacks, it's a negative impact on our economy, huge financial losses, undermining the operational integrity of the Republic's critical infrastructure, the reputational damage, the productivity loss, because you're not, if it's a ransomware, your operations are stopped, you're not able to function, and there are legal repercussions in some cases. The expenditure when you have to recover that information that you have lost, the damage to your infrastructure, the threat to national security, the airline passenger attrition, and passenger safety. So what would be the mitigating factors? We have to adopt a proactive approach to identifying and addressing cyber threats to passenger data. Ensure compliance with international data protection standards and regulations. Implement regular security training and awareness programs for staff. Earlier you were talking about a safety culture. which is also relevant. In cybersecurity, we are now moving away from talking about awareness, but talking about judgment. I think in the discussions with the earlier panel, it was about how do you internalize safety. So it's the same thing that we are saying in cybersecurity. Our employees should be in such a position that they are able to make that judgment themselves of what will be secure. So that's how we need to inculcate the cybersecurity in our programs. Collaboration is quite important. Collaboration within the industry. If it's cyber threats to the industry, even if it has not yet happened to you, but it happened somewhere, you should be able to learn from your peers and be able to take measures before it can happen to you. So that information sharing within the sector is quite important, and also information sharing between other agencies and government as well. And to continuously update and enhance security measures, we talk about the continuous threat exposure management, which is a framework that we need to adopt to be able to proactively deal with the cyber threats. What are we doing as government? Because cyber security is huge. It affects all of us in the country, but the government has to take the lead to ensure that the country and its citizens are secure or are cyber secure. The government approved the National Cybersecurity Policy Framework in 2012, which was gazetted in 2015. In there, stipulating what we need to do as government to deal with this monster. The NCPF stipulates that there must be a cyber security response committee that is led by SSA to ensure that we are able to coordinate the cyber matters within the country. We are able to give the policymaker the situational awareness so that they are able to plan, they are able to fund whatever activities that needs to happen. We are not there yet. No, we are not there. You see, I said 2012, and it's 2024. We are not there. What we have done, then they had listed the things that needs to be in place for us to say, as a country, we are comfortable, we will be able to deal with the issues. And unfortunately, in the meantime, cyber attacks are fast moving, the threats are there, this monster is changing shape every time, and we are chasing it when we are supposed to be in front to be able to block it. But having said that, it doesn't mean we should not continue doing something. We still have to work with it. So we currently have the Cyber Crimes Act, which was enacted in 2020. We have just completed in this month or last week the Cybersecurity Bill. When it was developed, it was we used the agile methodology where we were consulting as we were drafting. As it's something that is big and it's huge, that is new, but we now have the bill that we are going to share with as many people as possible so that people can comment on it and see how it can work for them. So the cybersecurity bill will talk about how you report the incidents, which structures needs to be established, how the structures are supposed to work, how do we deal with the national critical information infrastructure, how would it be identified, how should it be protected, how does government and everybody else work together deal with this thing. So it's important for everybody to comment to make sure that we are part and parcel of the solution. Then once the bill has been processed, then we need to have the regulations, because it's important to protect the national critical information infrastructure. So we need the regulations that will guide us on how to do that. The National Cybersecurity Strategy is not there yet, and the Cyber Bill is there to enable the strategy. So what was happening, the two were being driven together, but the strategy didn't get to the finishing line. Through the assessment that I spoke about, the national assessment on the cyber maturity of the country, we were able to identify where we are as a country. Like I mentioned, we are reactive, and we are able to list the things that are supposed to be in place that are not there. And then we also looked at what the future should look like and made the gap analysis to look at how do we get there. The most important things that we identified that we need to do is we must have the National Cyber Skills Framework in place. As a country, we need to build that future-ready talent pipeline. So for us to be able to tackle this monster, we need to have the skills. So it's important that we have that in place. It's important that we have the legislation and the policies in place that will enable us to do the work, like I mentioned, the reporting of incidents. It's quite important to report incidents because we are interconnected. So even if you sit in your little corner because you are uncomfortable with the fact that you have been hacked, all of us are hacked. You must be happy when you are hacked and you know. Think about those who are hacked and they don't know. So we are supposed to be reporting, and as you report, you are enlightening everybody else that here is something that we all have to protect ourselves from. Maybe we already have it and we are not aware of it. But also because we are interconnected. If you are keeping quiet and the next person doesn't know, can you imagine the ripple effect of that attack if we are not doing that? And also when you report, you find that somebody else has gone through that, then they are able to go and assist you. So it's important to report. So we also have a governance framework which we call a cyber risk management framework, which we have workshopped with the CIOs of entities of government. It gives the minimum baseline that would be acceptable to protect yourself. It's for the public sector and the critical information infrastructure, but anybody can use it. It just gives you the minimum standards that you need to put in place in the various domains, whether it's networks, operating systems, or whatever. So it just gives you guidelines, the policies that needs to be in place, and so on. And it's in the process of being gazetted. So it will be published one day. I spoke about the capacity and capability building, the importance of looking at the skills. But as government, we have a program of skills development within the public sector, focusing on the people who are currently in the public sector, not necessarily looking at those ones that will still have to come in. So it's important to have that skills framework because it talks to the schools, it talks to the sitters, it talks to the universities, in other countries, you have universities that will have a cybersecurity as a specialist a degree. So we still have to have something like that as a country. And then I spoke about the cyber awareness and again, the domestic, regional, and international cooperation or collaboration that we need to do. With that, this will be the end of my presentation. I was just giving you what we are busy with and what we haven't done. We are not there yet, but we are on the path to get there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. There is a lot of, we have not done them. 2012, 2024, I'm sure there is a lot of questions. But maybe some of the questions can be answered by the colleagues here. So I would just like to give you an opportunity, colleagues. Remember that thing called a graveyard shift. So in your opening remarks, and then, I'm sorry, you just have a remark and maybe on what the doctor spoke about. And then we're going to get some questions. We don't have the technology for this because we're cybersecurity. We're going to take it the manual way. So Mr. Nare, who wants to go first? I see, Wes, you look like, because you're a regulator, you want to help us. No, you can go first. I see you're volunteering.
Oh, should I? Okay. Yeah. I hope I'm audible. Is it on?
Yes.
I am, okay. Thank you, facilitator and program director. Like you have mentioned, I'm a regulator, so I have to say, let me rise on protocols we have established. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Otherwise, I'll get into trouble with my paymaster also, so I think they are watching somewhere. So really, program director, from our side, as we've indicated, I won't spend too much time introducing what we do. The long and short of it, we regulate the internet space in South Africa. And by true nature of the internet, it forces individuals, organizations to a large extent to adapt or die. I think if there's any doubt of that statement, you can ask Mr. Video. You can ask Stay-Keniko what's going on now. You can ask the meter taxis what's happening with their business models. And with that said, having said through the presentations and what the good doctor has spoken to, it really brings upon a question, especially to the authority that has invited myself and my fellow panelists here. Are you ready for what you are opening up yourself to? And I think we have sort of sugar-coated this thing because as a country, there are those that don't wish us well, both internally and externally. Now, if you now have this outlook of integrating and you're softening the blow when you're talking about culture and trying to minimize on the punitive side, you know, what's going to happen? And I'm saying this because, touch wood, you know, a lot has not happened. That is so disastrous on our side. But however, lessons learned is that we stepped in as a regulator in an environment which was self-regulating for the longest time. Now, the question that we are dealing with is, do we co-regulate or do we command and instruct? And also, this will bring a sort of a fundamental shift to the Civil Aviation Authority to say, answer that question, especially now you're talking about drones, you're talking about integration of systems, you're talking about customer service systems that are fully integrated, you're talking about automation, be it access whenever one is flying, which is a great thing, by the way. Wi-Fi in the clouds is wonderful. But you have all of these enmities, but they expose you to a certain level of threat. And this is the question that really you need to answer. Do you want to mix with self-regulated environments, which exposes you to a lot of threats? And if that's the case, are you prepared to collaborate? Are you prepared to be told you don't know? And then learn from those engagements. And I think those will be my opening remarks, and then I will allow questions if they come my way. Thanks.
Doreen, you have a lot of clients, so we're hoping that from you we'll get an understanding of what you're dealing with, what you're facing. I mean, obviously, that might actually help us. So what is your take on your opening and your take on what he's saying and what the doctor just said?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's very, wow, it's so out of character for a hacker to be sitting here, you know, telling the people that we attack on a daily basis what to do. I feel like I'm putting myself out of business. But anyway, since we're here, we might as well get to it. So I always, whenever I speak to my clients, or I always say, as an organization or as a company, you must always refer to yourself as a famous book called Art of War. Know yourself and know your enemy. Because, I mean, as a company, we deal with a lot of things, you know. You're frustrated about finances, about the operations of the business, and cybersecurity is almost, or is always the last resort for some companies, and that's where we actually penetrate. We've actually penetrated more companies via a very simple thing as a USB drop, because I've noted that some big organizations don't have controls, security controls when it comes to your critical internet infrastructure. So we've seen a lot of big organizations like British Airways, you know, they did get hacked. And the reason why there are cyber attacks, you know, within the aviation industry, we are really not motivated by, you know, the relationships between the manager and the colleagues, or we don't want to see your nude pictures. One thing that motivates us to actually get into your organization's, you know, critical infrastructure is because of the data. You know, forget the oil or the coal, that is no longer it. The newest big currency for us is actually the data. So the data that you have within your organization is actually what we're after. So it's very imperative for, you know, for CEOs and CISOs and IT managers to actually have controls that will not enable people like us to get into. And trust me, we have highly skilled hackers. You know, I don't know if you guys are aware, but South Africa actually once defeated Russia in a hackathon, and we were those people. So it's very important for you guys to have, you know, stringent policies when it comes into your critical internet infrastructure.
Thank you. So there is a competition for hackers even. Mr. Nar, she's mentioning data, and all our data sits there in your office. And as I said earlier, what is your opening remarks? I didn't want to put you on the spot there, but I'm just aligning it, you know.
Yeah, no, thanks, Given. And by the way, thank you for clarifying that part at the beginning. I was hoping that you won't talk about that. But I think maybe just on that point, colleagues, you will know that a few weeks ago, the regulator made a press statement and spoke about some processes that they're undergoing with the organization. And so based on that, and you also coming from a regulated environment, you know that, you know, while those processes are undergoing, it's very difficult to make public statements and also talk about some of the things that happened there. But I've got assurance from the leadership at the organization that if there's anyone here who really want more information about what happened there, take a call, schedule a meeting, they are ready, they will give you all the details that are allowed within this space that you are in. They've been engaging quite a lot of our customers on that. I hope that's fair.
No, it's okay.
Okay, so let me come back to, I think Dr. Irene mentioned some very important items there, and I mean, I'll leave the rest to the colleague, but I picked up two that I think for me, and when I looked at the audience here, I felt maybe let me expand on them and talk a bit about some of the work that we've done, you know. After spending almost 20 years in the cybersecurity industry and the IT space, you know, having traveled conferences, having read articles, I've come to realize that it's not a matter of if you're going to be attacked. It's a question of when. Yeah. All of us, at some point or another, you're going to be attacked. As long as you run IT systems that have got technology, you will be attacked. If Microsoft, if Google, if Apple, all of these guys that hires the top expert in IT get attacked and get ransomware and they get all of these things, all of us are going to get to that space at some point. So if you have not been, be ready, that is coming. I feel sad that I'm sitting next to a hacker there. But here's the issue. It's not really the issue that organizations have is something I call lack of cyber resilience. Right? And Dr. Irene mentioned risk assessment, mentioned recovery, mentioned proactive method. This concept of cyber resilience talk to how ready are you should you be attacked. So a lot of us plan not to be attacked. But I want to bring it to you to say, please plan that you're going to be attacked. It's a different way of planning, and I think those in the military probably know these kind of things very well, where you plan knowing that the enemy is going to attack you. What do you do when they attack you? It's not to worry about trying to protect them from attacking you. That you will do. You have to do that. But you must also plan how do you respond when they've attacked you. And this concept of cyber resilience, a lot of organizations are taking it very easy. You would hear that one organization has been attacked, and for 4 or 5 weeks, their systems are still down. And I sit there and wonder, did they really plan to be attacked, these ones? Because surely, if you plan to be attacked, that kind of a setup should never exist. And so that's really my passion. When I go out to organization, I keep telling them that, are you cyber resilient enough? If you are attacked tomorrow, can we still book that airline ticket in the following day? If, I don't know, if your internal system is blocked, can your employee come in and work? If your answer is still no, then you have a problem. And that's really what I want to open with. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Tunzalana, this year I must just mention that we are in the process now, and they're mentioning the concepts that are in the proposals that we've made for cybersecurity, privacy, and resilience. So actually we can safely say that the aviation space, we are now, from a regulatory point of view, putting that in place. Also, it's not that if you get attacked. Actually, the one is that there are two kinds of organizations. The ones that know that they've been attacked, and the ones that have been attacked but they don't know it yet. Mm-hmm. Normally when you know it's because it's a ransomware, it has to be public and all that, but some attackers attack in such a way that they get what they want and they don't make a noise. So it's actually that, it's much, much more worse than what the colleagues are saying. Dr. Tunzalan, before the questions, so you have the opportunity to manage the questions from your input and remarks.
Okay. Mic check, 1, 2, 1, 2. Can you hear me?
No, we can't.
Yep. Mic check. Mic check. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm Dr. Sibongiseni Tunzalana. I come from a company called FLI Global. We are based in the Eastern Cape, in Makanda, in the rural Eastern Cape. I'm born and bred in the rural Mkangiso. This place is not even on Google Maps. They haven't found a way to actually put geolocations on it. I have a PhD in information systems from the University of Cape Town with an exchange program from Ryerson University in Canada, in Toronto. While I was doing my PhD, I actually developed the first ever big data analytics business process model, and I tested it in 5 different countries. So while I was doing this back in 2008, and I completed this in 2011, I went to Schiphol, Amsterdam, and I went to Helsinki in Finland, and I went to Dublin in Ireland. 3 of these airports, they are the only airports in the world that are cyber safe. All airports in the world are not. So there was a study done in 2020 actually checking the cybersecurity safety of airports. Of the top 100 airports, only 3 passed these tests. So I incorporated that data and information to create my big data analytics business process model, which was commercializing as I was building it. I had a client in the UK called Pru Health, which was a merger between Prudential and Discovery. We had offices in Santon and in the UK while building this business process model and testing it. So 2 of the other countries then are formulating this business process model, which is a big data analytics model, came up with recommendations of being more proactive, proactive analytics, predictive analytics, and also prescriptive analytics. And that's what we used to actually build our SMME called FLI Global, which is based in the rural Eastern Cape. What really is our signature implementation of Note right now? It's in the aerospace, maritime, and defense sector. What we've done is at Simonstown, at SA Navy, and with Armscor, we've taken a manual process of ships and ship weaponry, which means balancing the ship and also the weapons that are in the ship. The process was done on dry dock land. What we've done is we've brought in hardware, we've brought in software, we've brought in big data analytics, and we've brought in cameras so that the balancing of the ship and the weaponry can be done at sea. So this process model and also this ship weapon alignment tracking evaluation system, what it does is it uses the cameras and checks the threats, and it fires off an alert to our team, and then our system then does the calibration, which is the balancing of the ship and the weaponry at sea, real time, and automated as well. So that's part of our innovation and invention. We did it during COVID, and we completed it in 2022, and we got 100% conformance standards by SA Navy. In response to Dr. Irene, we welcome your presentation, Doctor, and we appreciate the work we've done. However, we feel that we could do more agile work, more proactive, more quick turnaround times. We can't be talking about bills of 2012 in 2024 and still thinking about it. The threats are now, and the threats are here. People's monies are being extorted, and people's data assets are being used. Can you imagine you go to Home Affairs, you're married to 5 illegal immigrants because your data was extorted on Facebook and on social media? How do we then respond to the imminent and threats that we are facing on a daily basis? Imagine you go to a bank and you get, it has happened to most of us, and you see that some of the transactions, people are subscribing on your accounts. They've taken the information from WhatsApp, because with WhatsApp, you can link the phone number to bank accounts with certain banking institutions such as Capitec. You can use, you think that it's quick and easy, but then you are giving away your data assets that you should be securing on a personal level, on an organizational level, and on a team level. These things are happening, so we can't afford to be thinking about what to do. In response, we as FLI Global, together with our strategic partners, NetX, we've actually thought about these threats that are imminent now, and we have come up with an innovation that responds to threats from a physical infrastructure point of view. So everyone is complaining about how there's vandalism on sites where there's airports and also there's data centers. So what our strategic partners come up with, they've come up with TerraSense. This is a digital acoustic sensor system where you can actually prevent and be proactive in the vandalism of infrastructure at airports and at data centers. And also there's an element of social engineering. We are people. The same people who are online are the same people who are offline. So it's not like we are avatars. We're the same people, and we have a lot of devices. So you find that there are a lot of devices than people. So how do you then respond to these threats? You get yourself socially and digital literate on a personal level. And after understanding the assets of your data and how to respond from a social engineering point of view, how people steal your data, it's eavesdropping, it's communicating this information. So we must talk about the social engineering, which formulates 90% of the cybersecurity threats. 10% of the technology and the technical aspects we can solve. But how are we responding to the social engineering threats within the cybersecurity space, which then raises a point that it's important for us to get ourselves digital literates and also have cybersecurity awareness sections. As I had mentioned and alluded in my opening talk, is that when we implement these solutions for companies, we have companies that we service locally and internationally. The important part is, especially in the rural areas where data centers are built and also critical infrastructure resides, you have to include the locals there. The social aspect of social cohesion and including the very people who may vandalize this infrastructure need to be part of your business model. You need to call a meeting, that's what we do. We call meetings of key decision members. We call the various players there, the people who are, we've come up with an acronym called STEAMI, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, mathematics, inventors, and entrepreneurs. We get these people around the table and we say there's fiber that's going to be trenched because we are going to build TerraSense, we're going to build a digital acoustic sensor system. What is the role of the community members? Do we include the locals in the commercial making scheme? Maybe some of them are not technical, but there's a role that they could play in trenching for the fiber layoff. And then also in terms of cybersecurity awareness sessions, we get in artists and musicians. So I've turned into be a hip hop DJ now for my sins. And we create music and arts that communicates these difficult, complex technical aspects. As they implement these solutions with SMMEs, micro and sole proprietors, they participate into the solution. You find that our infrastructure is not vandalized, and the proactive and predictive systems that we use prevents it before it happens. So also there's an incident response that we factor into our solutions as well. When we are hacked and when our clients are hacked, how soon can they get back to normality? So again, the computer systems incident response, it's something that we believe every organization should have.
Doctor,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I have to come in there because I saw how Doreen was nodding, so I don't want her to forget what she wanted to say as we were talking about, especially the social side.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. We have a situation where one would say there's some sort of a proliferation of informal settlements that are just outside the airports. And we don't want to be seen to be criminalizing some of the triple challenges that Doctor spoke about of inequality, poverty, and unemployment. But as we are an organization that also has to comply with international bodies, we have to make sure that we have a balance between the two. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I am very mindful of the time, so I'll give an opportunity to about 2 members from the floor, or is the panel that good that you don't have questions? I have questions. I'm sure I don't want. I'm trying to avoid CAA members, but I see that. Wait. Yeah. Jasmine. I see Jasmine. Who else? Is there someone this side? It's dark here. Just mention if it's directed at someone, and remember the time.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's directed to maybe Dr. Irene, and maybe the rest of the panel can also assist. I think the conversation has probably been more downstream, in a sense that I think using her words, the bad actors. I think my question is, what work are we doing in that space? Seems like it's a very sophisticated and very expensive exercise, right? How organized are they? Who funds these bad actors? And also, is there an opportunity for the government and the industry to really collaborate? I think using the military language, instead of really waiting or planning to be hacked or dealing with that, can we attack the enemy first? Are there opportunities for that? I think we putting plans in place to plan to be attacked, but there's this sort of undercover glorification of cyber attackers. I mean, we do hackathons between countries just to see who's the best.
Yeah.
So how do we deal with that? Thanks.
Second one? Is that not? Okay. There's no one else. Which one? Oh, yeah. Okay.
Good afternoon. I just want to ask, since you are experts in cybersecurity, what happens when it comes the day when artificial intelligence actually will be the ones attacking us as individuals and not humans attacking us? What happens when we get to that point? Will we have systems in place where we can control these artificial intelligence so they don't get to a point where they attack us and use our information? Thank you.
Okay, the first one on who's attacking us and why are we not going after them? Wes, so you look like you can tell us.
I think facilitator, the question, what I wrote down is really you wouldn't know who's attacking you.
Yeah.
The best way is to hire people like Doreen, and you'll pay me, to hire people like her. And why am I saying her? Because she will preemptively come into your organization and determine vulnerabilities. And I think for those that have audit committees, you always dread that word when it comes up, vulnerability scans, brute force attacks from penetration testing and all of those. Those are key. Those are run by white hat hackers like Doreen here to ensure that at bare minimum you understand your vulnerabilities and you are able to address them. In the same breath, should you be attacked, how to respond. And that's quite important. And it speaks to what we have lamented on to say, you know, that ability to respond and the timeliness to respond is quite important. And I'm mentioning this is because while we're still lamenting on the way to respond, the hacker that is in your system is doing more damage. And that's the important part. And that speaks to what Simon was actually speaking to. You need to change the way that we think and plan.
Doctor, are you going on the first question or both? Or?
Yeah, I'm just adding to
Oh,
the
yeah.
first question. I think as a country, we also don't do attribution because to look for who, it would be a nice thing to know who is attacking you and be able to to hit back. Usually you will look at the TTPs, the techniques and procedures that a specific group is using. Then you will be able to attribute, but remember it's sort of like guesswork in a way. And nowadays it's even difficult because they now do form fusion teams where they work per project. So it's not, you still have those ones who still operate the old way, but there are new ones now that you can't tell. So you can't even like pin down their thumbprint and say it's this group because it's from different groups, they come and work in the specific project. So that's why we do not do the attribution. I think what is important is also what he's mentioning in terms of where are your vulnerabilities, where are these gaps, how can we close them? And the people that you call hackers, those are the people who are supposed to assist you because they are in this game, so they are able to see these are the vulnerabilities you have and this is how we can get into your system in this way. So they will be able to assist you in that regard.
Dr. Tunzalan, because of time, I'm going to give the colleagues, but yours then becomes a response maybe to the AI and closing. And then the colleagues can also just have closing remarks.
Okay. So my response
responses are beg to differ. Like we've got data, like data is our asset. We can use the data that we have at our disposal and we use it for decision making. For example, you can take your historic data, you can take your current data, and you can take your predictive data and your missing data and create a model to find out who's highly likely to attack you, for example. The reason I'm saying this is for your specific organization and your specific sector, you can use that. You can use open data, you can use public data, and create a model and an algorithm to actually predict and prevent who's highly likely to attack you. So having a data-driven solution for that particular organization. You know your competitors in your business world. You know who's highly likely. And also with your insider threats as well, you can track based on what's known and create an algorithm to actually predict and prevent. It may not be perfect, but it's a starting point. And when it comes to AI, AI is developed by people, for people. So it's us who actually develop. Are we then developing it in an ethical and moral way? AI now is becoming extremely out of control because the way we code, we don't use secure coding practices where there's ethical steps being put into the way we develop. So that's why then, if you're not a person who uses secure code practices, then you are not an ethical coder. And then that AI may, after a while, because it's embedded in machine learning and deep learning, it teaches itself over a number of iterations. And it could then do what it wants to do. How do we then prevent that? We prevent that by secure code practices and also regulation. And we regulate how coding is done. We regulate how we code securely and have access to secure coders. They are there, but a majority of coders don't code with consciousness of ethical coding and secure coding practices.
Yeah.
Thank you. Doreen?
Well, so I'm just going to be, I'm going to be very practical. So the first question, I'm just going to piggyback on what you said about AI. We need to remember that AI, you know, the algorithms that are being fed into the AI are being fed by humans. So the modeling that we are actively doing on AIs is based on our own biases. For instance, we have countries which have burned AI because of the racial profiling that it does to humans. For instance, countries like Japan, you know, they use the faces of black people to actually train the AI as to how a criminal has facial expressions. And we are, as the consumers of this data, we're actually feeding AI these algorithms. We have a lot of applications, like the Face app that makes women look more prettier than we are. That app is actually a data mining app, you know, so you feed it your data, you feed it your picture. So basically what it's supposed to do, it's supposed to show you how you look like when you were a baby, and it shows you how you're gonna look like when you're older, maybe 80 years. So those facial expressions are actually used to train the AI. So sometimes it's actually, you know, data warfare, where they use the faces of, you know, of a specific race to train how the AI is going to react towards impartial biases. So that's one of the things we need to be careful of, you know, as we're building this tech, it also affecting us in a way. Number two, you spoke a lot about social engineering. And the reason why I kept on nodding, it's because social engineering is actually one of the oldest tricks, you know, when you're doing pen testing and when you're trying to hack a person. The simplest way to hack a person is via social engineering, because I study the human, I know what you like. For instance, I can see that blue is your favorite color, you know? So it's very easy for me. It's actually very easy for me to hack you. You know, for instance, The most simplest way how we get into systems is, you know that you can actually get a temporary domain name online. You go online, you get a temporary domain name, you change the DNS servers. For instance, I see you like blue, and that can be from BMW South Africa, you know. I want you to try the new M4, which is blue, and I know you're gonna like it, because you like blue. So what I do, I just change the DNS servers, you know, I go to BMW, I check how it looks like, you know, I mimic the very same website, which is called a website, you mentioned, a domain name spoofing. I can actually spoof the website. You know, I can deface it. Then I change everything from the email signature to your picture, and I send you an email. And that email is actually from my own servers, but when you have a look at that email, it looks like it's from BMW. Then you click on it. The moment you click on it, I have everything that I want, be it your static IP address or whatever it is, I get it. It's very easy for humans to get hacked because we believe that I've won a prize, but I didn't enter any competition. And there's a scam, you know, running around where you get an email from a person sitting somewhere in Midrand, you know, saying that they've been watching you. You know, you've been doing things and they've been watching you, and they have that footage and stuff like that. Such things don't exist. It's such a pity that, you know, in South Africa, we do not have cybersecurity as a culture. So we wait until we get hacked before we can react. We've seen a lot of big players, you know, grovel once the information has been encrypted and you cannot do work anymore. So it's easy for you to actually necessitate a culture of cybersecurity awareness within your organization before you hire people like us. So when you hire people like us, when you get into your environment, the first thing that we do is we take you down and we check how your staff behaves. Sometimes you send an email and say, listen guys, there's a data breach, please do not click on emails. And you forget that as a manager, you actually upset someone and that person is going to click on that email. And the thread goes on and goes on. And it takes about 20 days for some companies to actually be back on. And sometimes they have to go all the way from automated to manual processes, just like Transnet. You know, I'm sorry if you work for Transnet, but it's the easiest, you know, yeah. So it's very important for us to understand what cybersecurity controls are from a legislative perspective to a compliance perspective. You cannot fire anyone because they couldn't encrypt a system if you did not teach them, you know, how to be cyber safe. So you need to have those policies. You need to have a bring your own device policy. You need to have a clean desk policy. How often passwords are being changed is very important. So, yeah. So it's important for us to have, you know, robust cybersecurity resilient culture and a network within employees.
Yeah. Batanar,
Okay.
your closing remarks.
Let me close where I started and where I said it's not an if, it's a when. You know, a research was done some years back where they checked some of the controls that the colleagues are talking about, whether you have a firewall, you have all of these tools that everybody has, configured by the best people that you can hire in the country. But some of those companies were also attacked. And what the cost of data breach tells us, and the report is there online, you can go check it. It says one of the biggest cost elements during a breach, it occurs just around the time you take to respond to the breach. That's what the real cost is. And so I still maintain, if you are sitting here, you don't even know your processes within the organization, you haven't even done the RTOs, the assessment, you don't know the time the return objective of your processes, which processes are critical, you are at risk. Because one day you'll be attacked and we'll read about you in the news. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Irene, your closing?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess the weakest link, it's a human being in this whole chain. So if that human being is not educated and is not aware and does not practice the cybersecurity culture, like he says, it doesn't really matter the most highly qualified specialist that you will have. If is not, doesn't have the right cyber judgment, you're still doomed. So the people are important. It's the people, it's the processes, it's the technologies. But the weakest link in this whole chain is a human being.
I didn't actually think this one of Doreen, where she said, you take out emails and you warn everybody, don't click on links. At the same time, someone wants an increase or you denied them a traveling of sorts. Then they're like, I'm going to click on this link. Exactly, I'm clicking. So while you're trying to stop them from doing it, then they do it. So it's very interesting, that one, Doreen. You want to say something? Not even a minute, Doreen, under a minute.
So I also wanted to say, from the cases that we've worked, in when we're doing, when you're trying to get the systems up, when in an event of a data breach, it's very important to have the machines segregated, correctly. Because let's just say now it's time to litigate. Maybe you have found the bad actors. Maybe it was someone within your organization, or it's an activist group that has been caught. Once you go to court, the first thing they're going to ask you is, was the chain of custody maintained while, we were busy doing digital forensics in terms of segregating the machines and trying to find out, rather, what is the post-mortem of the cybersecurity incident. So post the hack, what you do and how you act impacts the next attack. So segregating your machines, having string and policies, maintaining chain of custody, and sometimes, needing to apply Anton pillar, whereby you find out that the disgruntled employee is no longer within the organization and they have the system. So it's very important to have a digital forensic practitioner within your organization, especially when you're dealing with big data, so that in an event of a data breach, you know how to move and your incident response plans are actually properly and well defined. Thank you.
The one in charge of the internet of the country, .za, Mr. West, I left it to you because it sounds like pretty much everything that's being said here is your problem. Because if you are the one who has to regulate the space, the .za, which would be the digital South Africa, and make sure that we behave the way we should and we are safe, what do you say?
I think it's a tough one. When you deal with human beings and a very progressive constitution like ours, you'll always find yourself in that crossroads, because as a regulator that knows what's out there and what could happen to organizations and even state-owned entities, there's nothing really that you can do to force certain action out of individuals, and that's the saddest part. And that's why a change of mindset is quite important, and an inherent and direct, deliberate investment in cyber security awareness from a very young age is important. I would even go so far as to say we need to look at it at basic education going up to higher education, and trying to make people aware. And you could be saying, but that's not important. I know for a fact as the state, there's an ambition to digitize government services. Now, I have family in Tabanchu. I have family in Matatiele in KZN. Does my aunt in Matatiele know how to utilize these things? No, they will rely on a third party. Will that person have malicious intent? They wouldn't know. Would they be sharing information? They wouldn't know. You sign in at boom gates, and this is something that we do inherently without even asking. Security guards don't like me personally, because I always ask them, what are you going to do with my cell phone number? What are you going to do with my ID number? You are entitled to ask those questions. But none of us, just because we don't want to spoil our day because this man or this lady won't allow me in, we don't ask them. And these are simple things that we do on a daily basis that needs to change. And that will enable us from a regulatory perspective to really look at other issues of advancing the protection and becoming more proactive rather than focusing or defocusing on the core.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Mr. Chabalala, there's probably going to be a memo for us to have only a cybersecurity day and invite the industry, because there is a lot here that has been said. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and engagement.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Another round of applause to quite an insightful and engaging panel discussion. Thank you so much, Given, for doing such a wonderful job in moderating. I think what's thought-provoking for anyone in this room, an executive, an organization, is what cost are you willing to pay when it comes to cybersecurity? Is it the cost to protect your organization, your employees, the data that is so important, from your staff, your passengers, your customers, or is it the after effect? Which cost? But also instilling a culture, amongst staff members, amongst the general public, because I know for one, while I was listening, I could definitely relate to being one of those who just click yes on all the cookies, accept the cookies, because I just want to move on. Can we just get to the thing? Let's accept all the cookies. But if I were perhaps a lot more conscious and I had more cybersecurity culture, I would understand exactly what I'm doing. So thanks to the panel for that insightful engagement, and of course the ethical hackers as well for giving us some insights in what goes on into their work. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to allow our crew just a few seconds. I think they're actually done in setting up the podium as we move on to our next item on the list. And this will be our very last before we officially close off day one of the 2024 National Aviation Conference. Hopefully you have been hashtagging NAC 2024 on social media, just making sure that you are on the internet, safe and secure, letting everyone know about what's happening in this room. Otherwise, there's still more time, of course, for you to share and engage on social media. I'm going to invite onto the stage, though, Ms. Pindiwe Gwebu to please come onto the floor and introduce our next item. Please welcome her on stage.
Thank you so much, Dumelo. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my singular pleasure to introduce you and invite him to come on stage. Dr. Michael Masiapato, he is the Commissioner and CEO of the Border Management Authority of South Africa. You would have heard DCA in the morning in her introductory remarks telling us that there's a new kid on the block. They have hit the ground running. And we do have the pleasure of the Commissioner joining us this afternoon. And he is going to be talking to us about the role of the Border Management Authority, especially or with particular focus on aviation. Dr. Masiapato has over 2 decades of work experience in the security and intelligence cluster in government. He holds 2 doctoral degrees, one in governance and the other in public management. I can guarantee you that our borders are in safe hands. And I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Masiapato on stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I would not know how to greet in Chinese. Let me try again. Good afternoon, colleagues. No, that's great. Maybe let me start by appreciating this opportunity and appreciating the DCA for having invited us to just have this bit of conversation with yourselves, fairly about introducing a border management authority in the space with very specific focus to the work that we do in the aviation environment. I have fairly been given around 10, 15 minutes. So it will not be a real context. It will be very much of a high-level context for you to just have a bit of an appreciation of this border management authority, the context that goes with it, and of course, all the technicalities in terms of how we need to relate and interface with each other in as far as this work is concerned. So we had fairly defined the purpose of the conversation being to apprise members of the, or I would say stakeholders of the aviation environment on the basis of the work that the Border Management Authority is doing in the space, and more importantly, the introduction of it and all of the technicalities that go with it. So we'll just look at very basic, I would say 4 bullets that are very much critical for the conversation so that you will be able to fairly appreciate the issues that goes with it. The first one is just to have an appreciation in terms of the rationale. There are some people who are fairly arguing as to why do we have to have this new structure in the space, what is the context that we are seeking to achieve with it, and all of those kind of issues. So the purpose is basically to just reflect as to the rationale. Why did we have to have it? And I suppose some of the people will have heard about it quite recently, but the conversation has been going on for 20 years practically in the jurisdiction, as it were. And secondly, we'll look at how we kind of put it together. That is a bit of an administrative part. I will not spend much time off that, but just to have a broader appreciation in as far as that part is concerned. But more importantly, understanding the operating model of the Border Management Authority in relation to the government departments that used to operate in the space. And of course, that will also have to reflect in terms of the interface that we are supposed to be having with the rest of yourselves who are practitioners in the environment. And of course, we will then address some of the interventions that we have started putting into place in the aviation space as the Border Management Authority to be able to ensure that we start doing things a bit differently. And I think some of those that are already closer to the environment might have already started to see some bit of differences in as far as this is concerned. Now, let's look a bit into the issue of the rationale. You see, colleagues, in many instances, I will say that you will find people having very serious negative articulation on things that they do not have that much of a fuller appreciation of the context. And I can assure you that Border Management Authority was one of those organizations, even at the time of the legislation development, where there has been a lot of arguments and a lot of contradictions and confusions, primarily because people did not necessarily have a proper appreciation. Now, on this particular slide, the intention, colleagues, is firstly to try and give the rationale in terms of the entire environment. So what we can start by indicating, colleagues, is that we are all, I suppose, if I check the age, we were fairly already alive in 1994 during the transition. So on that particular period, colleagues, we inherited a multi-agency approach in as far as border management issues are concerned in the Republic. We literally woke up to find that there are a multiplicity of government structures literally operating in the border environment without necessarily having any proper coherence in terms of how do we make sure that they work better and they work together. So on that basis, we can for now just cite 7 as some of those critical structures. And I think you will fairly know some of those. But I think the most popular one, for example, is the Department of Home Affairs, and you will have a lot of other departments, whether it's the one for health, the one for environmental, the one for agriculture. As you will know, we do have customs in the space, the police, and of course, in terms of the other areas, mainly in the land environment, we do have the SNDF. So the reality of it is, at the point of transition, we had that. So if we are to look at just in the port environment, outside, having to look at the outside, and the port in this instance, I want you to just think about OR Tambo because it's the relevant example that we can be talking about. In this instance, just on the basis of aviation, so that we're able to have that broader, I will say, articulation. Now, if you can say 7, remove the SNDF, for now we can talk about 6 structures in the environment. So what that basically created, that multi-agency approach, it created an environment where if you were to arrive at OR Tambo before the 31st of March 2023, you were going to find a situation that there are 6 bosses inside OR Tambo coming from government, and they are bosses in their own right. So practically you had an immigration manager at OR Tambo from Home Affairs, a boss in his or her own right. There was a manager for agriculture inside OR Tambo coming from Agriculture Department. There was a manager for health coming from health and is the boss in the environment. Same for the environmental, same for customs, same for the police. So that is basically the nature of the environment that we're sitting with. Practically speaking, inside the port, you will then have some kind of 7 different standard operating procedures that had to be deployed for the purposes of effecting border management in one place, 6 bosses as it were. Now, the practical example that I always give in this instance, just to demonstrate how technical it was for us to have deployed a multi-agency approach inside a port of entry, but never did that in other areas. If we had to do this kind of an approach in other areas, it's more like you arriving at a school and you want to really figure out who's the boss here. And 10 bosses arrive, and they actually all tell you that I'm the principal in this school. And then what's happening? He said, no, I'm the principal of English, so I'm the boss in the school. I'm the principal of agriculture. I'm the principal of whatever the subject, mathematics. I'm the principal of whatever, English. Then if you have 10 principals in one school, just imagine how that school is supposed to be run. But that is exactly what we did in as far as border management is concerned. So in that particular reality, it became very much clear. Looking at the fragmentation, looking at the silos, looking at the facilitation of corruption, that has been very evident. I think if you were in South Africa since then to now, you should be able to agree that multi-agency approach never assisted. Therefore, we had to move away from the deployment of a multi-agency approach in as far as border management is concerned, and then adopt what we call an integrated border management platform, whereby we take all these various functions, we infuse them under a single authority with a single command and control, and it then given the mandate to do border law enforcement and do everything in that particular environment, takes accountability in the entire matrix in as far as border management issue is concerned. Now, logically speaking, we tried. In the past 30 years, that is before the 31st of March 2023, we tried 5 different iterations in coordinating border management activities. And as you will know, most of those were just structures created without any legislative imperative. When we tried that, I can tell you now, I don't have time to go into each one of them. But the only thing that I can give you or indicate to you as an example, there was one that we had called the BCOCC, which we did in 2001 in trying to facilitate the coordination. And we located it within the SARS environment. And what that actually happened was the BCOCC shifted into customs and focused in terms of the activities around the movement of trade, whilst immigration on the other side started to suffer. When we realized the World Cup is coming, just down the line in 2010, we did away with the BCOCC and we came up with the Interagency Clearing Forum. And that was the forum to try and move the entire matrix into the immigration side. We did that, and I can tell you, we literally facilitated every other thing that walks into the Republic. And there was no any imperative in terms of national security. There was no any thinking about the protection of the country's national interest. As you know, since then until this day, most, if not, I don't want to say all, lot of fellows, whether they came from South America or any other part of the world, they entered this jurisdiction in the name of coming to see the World Cup. And as we speak, since then to today, they are running this country's underworld. And it's very difficult to dismantle them. And that is the reality that we are facing. Now, we had to agree. The way in which we did border management for 30 years did not assist. We have to start doing it differently. And that is a fact. So that is why we had to do the integration. And that is why we had to then have BMA in this particular context. What does it mean in simple terms? Colleagues, as you can see there, the discussions in the development of the BMA Act took 15 years in Parliament. A lot of political confusion, and by the way, the majority of the deliberations, in some of the instances, there are those who were actually projecting confusion, yet they were not confused. It was an intention to confuse the environment. And for those who did not necessarily follow through the discussions, also thought that they were confused, but they were not confused. As you will know, in real life, in any environment of confusion, there will always be beneficiaries. In that particular instance, when you want to bring in order and want to bring in a principle and do things differently and better, with the intention to protect the country's national interest and make sure that the country's national security is preserved, there will be those that will be pushing back. And of course, if you do not understand the bigger picture, you will even think at some point that they do have a point. Now, the reality is the discussions unfolded up to the point where the president signed the Border Management Authority Act in July of 2020. And that is what gave rise to the existence of the BMA on this day. What does it mean in terms of functions? One, Section 5, subsection A of the Border Management Authority Act says, from now on, 1st April 2023, we are responsible for facilitating and managing the legitimate movement of persons in the Republic. What that means is we have now taken out the Department of Home Affairs in as far as immigration activities are concerned on the ground at the port of entry. So from then, the Department of Home Affairs no longer exists at the port of entry. That is why you can see we have taken over immigration function in as far as the movement of people. We have to be the ones making sure that we effect border law enforcement. We make sure people who arrive at the port have all the requisite documents according to the existing protocols. That is the point. The second aspect, we have taken over port health responsibilities that used to be done by the Department of Health, which effectively mean we have taken them out of the port environment and they no longer exist. So the movement of persons, it has to be one, somebody with all the requisite documents, which is immigration, but somebody who is not bringing any kind of disease in the Republic, infectious, communicable, or otherwise. And that is why we are the ones who are now doing the scannings and everything of the people who are entering the jurisdiction. Now, Section 5, subsection B, Border Management Authority Act tells us, facilitate and manage the legitimate movement of goods. When we talk goods, it can run from agricultural products and any other thing that comes out of it. Animals as well as any animal products that comes out of it. Therefore, we have taken over agricultural biosecurity work on the ground and we have removed the Department of Agriculture out of the port environment. They no longer exist. Similarly, we have taken over the responsibility of the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment in terms of environmental biosecurity issues. To that extent, they no longer exist, and we have taken over those responsibilities. That is basically what we call integrated border management platform. Therefore, it means that we are in the journey of establishing a single authority that is going to be taking accountability for everything in the port environment, and that is supposed to be the way. Now, if you look at C, it tells us there that we need to cooperate with other three organs of state, and I will talk about how do we cooperate with them. SAPS, SNDF, and SARS. No confusion, very much clear. All of those issues are well defined in terms of how do we relate, how do we interface, and how do we work together. Nothing is confusing. The people who wrote the Border Management Authority Act as part of the contributions we've made, because they know South Africans, naturally, we have an element of fighting for space and fighting for territory, because unfortunately we got trained that way from the point of grade R. You will know if you've been to grade R, they have some small desk that they give to the kids. They give them a very small chair, and they even put their books just behind that particular chair. And they train them that this is your chair from now on, nobody must come closer here. That is what happens from grade R. So that reality continues until people are even adults, they go to varsity, they come and work, and that territoriality continues. That is why they put Section 4.2 in the Border Management Authority Act, and they say, when it comes to border law enforcement work in the port of entry as well as in the border law enforcement area, that work must be done exclusively by officers of the Border Management Authority Act. Border Management Authority. They said that so that there's not any confusion. Colleagues, what does it mean in simple terms? What it means in simple terms is, because none of the departments are actually existing in the port itself, it means BMA is just a frontline law enforcement authority. But the departments, they still carry the responsibility in terms of developing policies, developing the laws, and therefore write directives that needs to be followed through by the Border Management Authority in doing the work on the ground. That is what it means. Nothing complicated about it. These are the slides I said I'm not going to talk much about, but I just want to indicate, because we had to take over the responsibilities, but there were already officials on the ground that we had to take the job from. We couldn't fire the people, but what we did, we had to enter into a process of integrating those people into the Border Management Authority, coming from their respective government departments. It is for that reason that whilst we do have the Border Management Authority Act that establishes the authority, gives it the overall responsibility, but there are a multiplicity of pieces of legislation sitting in various government departments that we are supposed to do work on their behalf. It is for that reason that the president has to sign Section 97 proclamation, moving those various functions that were sitting in the laws of those departments and give them to the Border Management Authority, and we are responsible for implementing those laws on the ground. Therefore, we had to integrate all of the colleagues on the ground who used to work for those government departments. This is the process that we have undertaken. We took all the team immigration, we took all the team health, we took all the team environmental, we took all the team agriculture, integrated them under a single authority, did away with all those different uniforms they wore, and have a single uniform for the Border Management Authority. And then, in a port of entry, we now have a single port commander responsible for border management across all streams, whether it is immigration specialist, agricultural specialist, environmental specialist, or even environmental biosecurity experts. All of those are now reporting under a single command and control. If you were to go to OR Tambo today, you will see them. They wear different insignia, demonstrating that these are the specialists in this particular category, but they are all infused under a single Border Management Authority. All the standard operating procedures in the scattered manner they were all done away with, and now we have a single standard operating procedure applied in the port of entry with the intention to bring in seamless movement of people and make sure that even the movement of trade is as better, as efficient as possible. And that is basically the essence. And of course, if you want to see what we might have done in the past few, I would say months, you can be able to see that. Maybe I can give you a typical example of something that you can find on YouTube. When some of the people were interviewed just now in April, during the festive, the Easter period, where they were able to confirm that we used to come here in Beit Bridge and spend 4 hours to actually cross from South African side to the Zimbabwean side, but today we spend at least 30 to 45 minutes. And that is what people say by themselves. It's not necessarily anything that I can say, we said it, they speak because they experience the reality. If you were to go to Libombo Port of Entry on the N4 corridor to Maputo, Maputo as it were, trucks used to stand there. The National Logistic Crisis Committee set by the president with the private sector and the freight forwarders, they indicate we had been able, since we took over, to reduce the truck's waiting time at the port from 9 hours to at least around 3 hours. And we're still working to meet the international standard, which is around 2 hours or so. And that is basically what we are working towards. So this is basically the work, and that is the reality. If we can then move quickly, this is just a demonstration of what we had deployed, which we call the border guards. For now, I am not going to go much into this because it's a bit irrelevant for the aviation side. But this is the deployment of the border guards in all the vulnerable segments of the country where people had been killing South Africans, taking their cars, exiting them in northern KZN. We have closed that where you see E33 there, and that is where we have the border guards stationed there to make sure that that issue of the cars being hijacked, high-valued, pushed into Mozambique to the other side, it has to stop. Again, you can go check what we have done and what the impact of that has been up to this point. And all of those are the kind of issues that we can look at a later stage. But the reality is that we had started doing the work on the ground. So that is the deployment. Now, quickly, we are going to run through now what I call the operating model of the BMA. I now have 10 minutes, I'm done. Not 10, I think I have 5 or so. Now we say operational model in terms of other organs of state. I want to quickly take you through some of the interrelationships so that you have a bigger picture of it. Let's start quickly with the DFFE, Department of Forestry Fisheries. What are they responsible for? They are still responsible for the issuing of the issues of the permits when people want to import or export anything related to endangered species. When people have to export, for example, some lion teeth or lion head or whatever the case, and all of those permits get issued by the department itself. Our responsibility is to make sure when the consignment arrives at the port, it does comply with all the provisions. The permit that is there, the certification that is there, it complies. We do verifications. We allow the importation or the exportation, as it were. They are also responsible for issuing all the parameters in terms of what we need to do to handle the consignments and all of those kind of issues. They are also the ones who can actually do the tax and all of those things in terms of the consignments and all. Our responsibility is border law enforcement to make sure that everything is done according to plan. Our responsibility on the right-hand side, as you can see, very clear. If you were to look at DALRAD, which is agriculture, they are still the ones who actually issue phytosanitary certificates for any person who wants to import or export any agricultural stuff. And of course, if there is importation or exportation of any animal stuff, there is obviously your veterinary permits, certificates, and all of those. They still get issued by the department. Our responsibility is to make sure when the consignment arrives at the port, whether it's on air or tambo, it arrives on land or even on sea, everything complies, and therefore we are able to do the border law enforcement work, and we are able to allow it to go through and all. That is basically the difference between what we do and all. If you were to look at health, same. The Department of Health, still the ones that makes the determination. If COVID comes back, as an example, it is the Department of Health that will say there is COVID that is coming. We will need people to produce negative COVID certificate when they arrive at the port. They send a directive. We have to make sure people comply. When they cancel out the directive, we also make sure it is canceled. Similarly, if you come from Brazil, you land at OR Tambo, you come from a yellow fever infested country, you need to come with a yellow fever certificate. If you don't have, we don't allow you in the country. That's border law enforcement, issued by that particular jurisdiction in terms of the vaccinations that you will have needed to have and all of that. So this is basically the relationship. Nothing complicated, very much straightforward. The departments still send directives, we do the work. What Border Management Authority model has done, it separated a referee from a player. Before then, the department will set the rules and go and apply the rules. And that is why the level of corruption that was taking place could not be controlled. And now we are trying to bring things into the ground differently. Similarly, the Department of Home Affairs, still, they issue travel documents. They are the ones who issue visas. They are the ones who issue all of those issues. Our responsibility is to make sure when people arrive at the port, they are definitely coming through with relevant certificates, relevant documentation. Once we pick up that what you have is not necessarily what is issued legitimately, we are unfortunately going to intercept you, and we are unfortunately going to make sure that you get deported on the spot. Just in the past 2 weeks, as an example, and we do that all the time, on Saturday and on a Sunday, we're able to intercept 18 Pakistanis. All of them, they actually came carrying a visa that was actually a one visa duplicated 17 times. And therefore, they arrived at the port. Among them, there is one person with the real visa on his name. The rest has been duplicated. The number is the same. And therefore, if it was not on the new model, the people will then still be able to just facilitate them. In the same way that you facilitated maybe the thousands or whatever that you now know they are in the country. But the reality of it, we have to do that due diligence. And unfortunately, once that happens, we have to return them on the spot. And those are the realities of the work that we are doing. Now, we then have the law enforcement team outside the specialized functions. Because the other functions, we call them specialized. Now we have the normal law enforcement. We have the border guards, law enforcement port. These are the ones that are doing work inside the port. And you will see in the next slide, we have the ones that do the work outside the port. The ones that do the port, you'll start seeing them now in OR Tambo, for instance. They will be looking very much serious. When you come in and you arrive at the port environment, they will basically be on your case, as other countries of the world do, to make sure that we don't have people bringing in things they are not supposed to be bringing. As we speak now, or before even we came on the ground, people were literally just walking in and out as they wish and all of those kind of issues. So these are the fellows who are actually going to be addressing the issue of counterfeit and the like and all of that. If you are to go to outside, again, this is now on the street, this is now in the bush, this is now where we work with the SNDF on the borderline. I don't want to bore you with those details because they are not about aviation. If you move to the next one, this is where we now relate with the police in as far as the border guards, how we relate with revenue in as far as the border guards. One of the things that is the biggest one as I move towards concluding is this issue of saying, what is the difference between the border guards and the police officers? Simply put, Section 4.2 guides us. It says, when it comes to border law enforcement in the port of entry and border law enforcement area, that particular work is exclusively done by officers of the BMA. For instance, if you go into a land port of entry and you find officers manning all the gates into the port, doing access control, asking the people who are coming into the port whether they have travel documents or not. That particular work for all these years was done by the SAPS. And I think we know by now that is not policing work. It's not what we call classical policing work. That is border law enforcement. That particular work is what border guards will be doing. However, when somebody gets shot inside the port of entry, that is now a classical crime. The border guards are not investigators, they are not detectives and all of those. Once that happens, the police will be called in, they take over the crime scene, and obviously they do the rest of what they need to do. That is the difference. It cannot be complicated. It is very much straightforward. The next question is, if this is how the relationship looks like, do we still need the police inside a port of entry? The reality of it is the border guards are appointed based on the Criminal Procedure Act. They are peace officers. They can do every other thing that the police can do except investigative work and the like. Practically speaking, you don't need them. However, if a crime happens, they can be called at any time. Somebody says, no, but that's not fair. We need to have the police sitting in there waiting for the crime to happen. Therefore, people basically argue, and somebody actually argued the other day, to say that the 10-kilometer radius given to the border guards therefore mean the police cannot enter in there. And that was part of trying to create confusion out of nothing. The reality is that the 10-kilometer radius has its own purpose. Anybody who gets arrested in the 10-kilometer radius is considered to be arrested in the port of entry, and we do direct deportation. We don't have to take you to Lindela and go to courts and stuff like that. Hence our deportation numbers. You have seen in 10 days, we did almost 10,000. Just from the time we started, we have deported 281,000. So you couldn't do that if you have to take people to Lindela, take them to some court and to some magistrate and all of that. So we do direct deportation with the issue of dealing with illegal migration. 10-kilometer is for that purpose. It's not to say the police cannot come into the port of entry. And I had actually said to some of the people who were trying to create confusion and say, the police by law can operate anywhere in the country, including in our own bedrooms. But at the end of the day, you do not need a constable deployed full-time in your bedroom. Why should we then have to argue whether the police can come and work in the port of entry or not? They can come and work in the port of entry when it is necessary to do so. Similarly, if you strangle your wife in your own bedroom, you will get to realize that that particular place is declared a crime scene, and you no longer own that bedroom until they do all the criminal investigation. That is how it works. How can you say there is confusion between what the border guards as well as the police must do? No confusion. In terms of SARS, very clear. SARS's responsibility is to make sure people declare, people pay their excess duties. Our responsibility is to deal with counterfeit and make sure people don't under-declare, and therefore people push in goods in the Republic that are not supposed to be pushed in. Very much simple, very much straightforward, and everything is embedded in law. Section 27 says there must be protocols. They're all designed, all developed, no confusion in terms of the work that we do. So what are we doing? And this is supposed to be the last one, is the issue about the challenges we've been having at OR Tambo. And I think this is your area of interest very closely, DCA and the rest of the colleagues. We had inherited an environment where the entire space has been neglected. No investment and literally no nothing, practically speaking. In terms of all of these responsibilities, and that is very much real, it is for that reason that you find that we had issues where just basic human resources, we have 40 cubicles there in OR Tambo arrival, but you find that there are 5 people working, and people are queuing there and they start to be very much agitated, starting to make some noise and all of those kind of issues. So we are bringing around 67 immigration specialists very soon, particularly OR Tambo as well as Cape Town International, and make sure that all those cubicles must be full, and people as they arrive there, we must make sure that at least our turnaround time, we talk about at least 5 minutes processing period or processing time. The most powerful issue, we are now rolling out the biometric movement control system. So the biometric movement control system is going to enable us that everybody entering South Africa must have their biometric actually taken. Because we know what the fellows actually do, especially the fellows from Asia. So what they basically do, they come with the same passport. Basically, they almost look the same, and almost they are. And I mean, I'm being honest. Again, I don't think, hey, this fellow is out of order. So if you do not do biometric, you are going to be facilitating 20 people under one passport. Because basically what we're doing is, somebody comes, we just say passport, we just put it in and he goes. We just stamp, put it in, stamp. I mean, basically one passport, all the fellows. And that is the reality. Now, the point is, you can't run a country that way. We just have to be very much practical, without even being political. So at the end of the day, we are bringing all of these things in the space. As you will know, we are working with AXA. We are going to bring those, what they call electronic gates and all of those, where people will just have to come through, spend a second, and then they are on the other side, particularly the domestic ones. There are a lot of other issues. We are also, by the way, finalizing what we call the port targeting center. Single port targeting center that is going to be in all of the ports. In those years, you found that there is one camera here, what do you call that? Customs. One camera here, customs, it goes into the customs control room. There's another camera here is for the police. It goes to the police control room. Another camera here, agriculture control room. I mean, honestly. Anyway. So that is the reality. So what we are doing is, we are abolishing all those, they call them control room, this and all of that. Now, the reality of it, that fragmentation practically, literally facilitated corruption to the extent that people were saying you can't deal with it. And I was saying the other day, I said, no, don't worry. Dealing with corruption is very much easy. Just give us some few cents, you will see. Very much easy. So what we are doing is, we are actually abolishing all of those who are going to have very key port management directed cameras, doing that together with AXA, one control room, we call it the port targeting center. Everything that moves in the port will be on camera and make sure that nobody is moving all these nefarious things that fellows have been doing for all this while. So all of these issues are actually, things are on the way. In terms of whether our officials will continue being corrupt or not, you don't have to worry. 2,000 plus body cams are actually ordered at AMSCO. They are on the way. So practically speaking, what that means is all of the officials, in terms of their interaction with all travelers, will be on board visual and audio, and all of those things will be controlled in an off-site platform. They can't switch it off. They will just have to request if they go to the bathroom, and it's understandable. Now, the reality of it is the camera is always on as you are busy doing your work, so that if you start discussing any nefarious issues, everything is on camera, and we should be able to deal with that. So it can be difficult to deal with corruption. Now, the reality of it is we have to do things differently. Now, as we conclude, we are just saying, please, stakeholders of the aviation environment, support this work that we are doing. Please, do not be confused by people who seek to confuse other people. And this is my last statement. There are people who argue that we don't need borders because there are no borders in Europe. And I can tell you now, that is not true. If you go into OR Tambo today and you enter into an aircraft and you go to Paris, you are going to land in Charles de Gaulle Airport, and that is a border or a port of entry. The only problem we have is when people think a border is Zimbabwe and a border is Beit Bridge, and they end there. They are not necessarily aware OR Tambo is a border. It is a port of entry, and that is what it means. So if somebody says there are no borders in Europe, you must just know it doesn't exist, that particular statement. There is what we call European Border and Coastal Agency. The people who read, they will tell you it's called Frontex, and that is the border. My colleague on the other side is there, and we talk all the time. And actually, he was laughing the other day when he heard that there is no borders in Europe. And what they did in Europe, you will know about it. And by the way, it's not something that is impossible to do. They just relaxed the requirements in the movement within their jurisdiction, in the Schengen environment. They relax the movements inside, and they move in between themselves without necessarily using passport. What are they using? They are using civic registration documents called IDs, identity documents. Now, if you want to move that way as Africa, it's not impossible. but it will take you some bit of time. Probably it might be implemented when most of us are ancestors. And the reason for that is we are still very much behind in terms of civic registration in the continent as we speak. And that's reality. Some people even think South Africa is sitting at 100% civic registration. That is not true. We are sitting at around 85% civic registration. There is about 15% of the people out there in the bushes who are actually not having any civic document. If you go to the DRC today, they will tell you, it's not even a secret. You can even Google it as I'm talking to you now, and ask how many people are having identity documentation in that particular jurisdiction, and the rest of the others. The only country that is number one in terms of civic registration is Egypt, primarily because they made sure that each and every labor ward has a home affairs or interior department close. When the child comes out, they say, what is the name? And they register. And that is how it happens. So with us, as you will know, children get born, and therefore people go home, and we have to also, kill some bit of goat to get the name. And then when we try to come back, there is a long queue, and we end up not registering the child. So those things are real. So we are trying to say that we cannot be confused about issues of border management. They are very much serious. As we speak now, I don't want to talk about the rest of the other issues that are happening. And by the way, one of the reasons why our economy is stuck in the past 10 years, all the economies, they can come out here and try to debate, and we can have some kind of nice intellectual discourse. But the reality is, the illicit economy in this country is growing very fast, to the extent that it is busy strangling the formal economy. And you know it. It's not necessarily something that we have to debate much. We do know as we speak that South Africans, because of poverty and the challenges they have, they are mainly drifting into the informal economy. And you know the kind of things our people are eating, being bought into some places out there. And all of that, and most of that, is purely illicit. So what does it mean? It means that the illicit economy is busy booming, whilst the formal economy is busy being strangled. What does that mean? It means that your tax collection still keeps going down. At the end of the day, if we are not serious on border management, I don't know what that will mean. Otherwise, we will have to... Anyway, so that is the essence. Thank you very much, madam.
Dr. Masiapato, may I please ask you just to come on stage just for 2 seconds? I'm only going to allow 2 questions for you, if possible, if you may allow me, Commissioner. And by the way, please wish the BMA happy 4th birthday. This year is their 4th birthday as the Border Management Authority. So please give them a round of applause, all this work that's been done. And perhaps you may have a picture up. There's a Q&A first. All right, may I please ask you to sit, Ms. Koza, but you may come next to me in Ndati Masiapato. I'm so sorry. Can you please come next to me? You've been standing for so long, but I have to stand with you. I'm only going to allow 2 questions, but I will ask the first question. Okay. We just had a long day. Nobody gave me a chance to ask my question. It's the news anchor's time. Okay. Ndati Masiapato, the 29th of May is the general elections. Which party are you not voting for? Which party is confusing you that you are not voting for? That we should be aware of for border purposes, issues of border management.
I think, colleagues, it's very clear that that cannot be answered. The only thing that I can say is, the discussions for BMA establishment took 10 years, and it involved all of the families. So I don't know which one, but the reality is that it took that long, and we generated problems in that whole period, and now to try and reverse is very much difficult. So in terms of the voting aspect, as you will know, the vote is my secret.
I tried. Let me take one more question. I see a hand just on my left. May we please have a mic? Let's just take that question, please.
Thank you, and thank you, Commissioner, and a very good talk and presentation. My question is, I'm from the CAA, General Aviation Operations. One of the duties of my department is to do oversight over general aviation, so not the commercial stuff, but everything from small light aircraft all the way to the bigger aircraft that fly privately all over the country. One of the things that we've noticed along our borders are, especially if we go along the Botswana border, the Namibian border, there's a lot of small airfields, private airfields on be it farms or just be it isolated rural areas. Directly opposite the border, 3, 4, 5 kilometers, we find small airfields on the other side of the border. Now, it's fairly logical that those areas are not manned, they're not patrolled, there's not a lot of oversight or policing going on. And I think those areas open themselves lend themselves quite easily for, be it smuggling, human trafficking, cross-border, transport, people coming into the country legally or exiting the country legally. From a CAA point of view, our job is to ensure safety and compliance with aviation regulations and aviation standards, not immigration. But in terms of the act, as you've said, there's collaboration between your authority and the other 3 authorities. Is there any potential for future collaboration with the CAA when we do our oversight, when we come across and we become aware of potential occurrences along these borders in these isolated airfields? Thank you, Commissioner.
No, thanks, sir, and thanks to Mel. You see, if we were to really talk about the issues in real life, it was going to be taking us a lot of time in trying to articulating the nature of the problems that we are sitting with as a country. It is fairly very much scary. And if we don't move with speed in starting to mitigate those issues, in very much short space of time, we might not necessarily have what we thought we have. So what you're saying is a fact, and what you're saying, it is there. As you will know, what people basically are doing, they're actually moving small aircrafts in very serious illegal landing strips. Most of those, or some of those, are in farms. And the movements and the things that they are moving in and out the jurisdiction are the things that we actually know what are those. It's not necessarily that it's a secret. They are there. We know about those issues. We just need to do our work. Now, what does it mean in terms of a mitigation point of view? We have to be doing intensive work, including yourself, in terms of the work that you are doing, but also the Department of Transport, and be able to deal with these issues of these trips. We know the fellows, literally, they fly below radar, and as they fly below radar, they are not being picked up by high levels issues. And those are the issues that we must be able to deal with. So I agree with you, we should be able to do that cooperation. BMA, what is good about it from a cooperation point of view, it is not even something that you say it is a good idea from somebody. It is legislated. As you have seen, Section 5, subsection C says, collaborate with border communities, collaborate with any other stakeholder involved in this particular space. So our collaborative work is very much implied, and that is why we collaborate with every other structure in the same environment. Maybe the last thing to say to Mel on this, you will remember AfriForum at some point when we started, because they might not have understood what we are supposed to do and who we are and the context of our work. There was some kind of confusion that emerged, to say AfriForum is now patrolling the border and all of that. I had to literally go sit down with all of the stakeholders or all of the people in that platform and be able to explain to them. There is no need to compete. There is no need to confuse the people. We just need to collaborate, work together, address the issues. Most of the farmers, they are affiliated to them. We are actually building that relationship. Business against crime, we are having a relationship against them. One of the reasons why we are starting to mitigate the issues of the stolen vehicles, by the way, moving across, is part of the same partnership with the trekking companies and all. You see, the work that we do in the background is very scary. The unfortunate part is when the car crossed to Mozambique, as an example, as we speak, those vehicles that were taken here, they are being driven by the colleagues in Mozambique, still registered on GB number plate. Mm-hmm. When we say we need these cars to take them back, they said, no, they bought them. So the principle of innocent buyer, so you can't take it. Right. And those are real. So we must be able to say, how do we now start collaborating? So I agree with you, we should be able to collaborate, deal with these issues, get them resolved, but it needs all of us. But because sometimes, and I'm glad to when I see it, sometimes the people project confusion in the space. It's not because they are confused. They are not confused because the issues are very clear. But when they project it, what do we do as South Africans? Instead of starting to deal with the problem, we go back to the intellectual issues and start trying to be I mean, it's like arguing about xenophobia, as it were. Something that is just a philosophical statement that doesn't exist. Because I say we have to facilitate the same people. The same people are actually wanted to come into the country because we want tourism, we want to engage. So you can't say you are facilitating people and therefore you hate them. It doesn't make sense. When we say we have moved 270,000 people into Beitbridge, for instance, it is the same people that are actually somebody is supposed to say we are hating them. We can't hate you and facilitate you. But that's exactly what we do. So at the end of the day, all of this work that we do is supposed to come to the same objective. Other people say, just to conclude, they say, we need open borders. I don't know what is open because they're already open. Until they were closed during COVID. So now they are open, hence people are moving. So if you say we need open borders, I'm saying, but guys, they are open. Let's try to go on the N1 and see if they are closed. They are not closed, they are open. If you say you want open borders, what does open mean? Maybe there's a different way open is defined.
All right,
so we don't have to be confused. Thanks.
I have one last question for you, and please, can we keep it brief? I heard there's one hand. Quick question, please, for Commissioner, for you to answer, please.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner. That was a lovely presentation. Two things caught my attention. The first one is the authority procuring biometric software. That's the first one that I wanted to ask. I'm quite interested in that. The reason why is I needed to understand the reason for biometric controls, because we've noted that, you know, the people that we're trying to mitigate unlawful entry are the ones who are actually, you know, hacking biometric controls. So I needed to understand that, you know, with the adoption of AI and imaging technologies in South Africa, what mechanisms do you have in place to guard against the hacking, or rather the threat to biometric controls? Because, you know, with facial recognition and with deep fakes, I don't know if you have seen deep fakes where they take your face and they put it into a system and you become something else. What are the plans? Do you have any plans to guard against, you know, the threat to biometric controls? And number two, we have load shading and we have an issue of digital adoption and digital literacy in South Africa. And notwithstanding the fact that most officers don't actually know how to use computers, they don't know how to use, critical internet infrastructure. For instance, your colleagues, you know, once they buy a new phone, it's a brand new Facebook profile. They have about 500 of them. So what plans do you have to make sure that whatever it is that you're procuring will work? Number two, it will work to its optimum effect. And number three, can we test it out? Can we play with it and see if it will work, you know, in terms of it being safe and resilient against cyber warfare? Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to be in trouble with Tumelo. Let me be short and say the biometric movement control system is already working as we speak. If somebody has traveled quite lately, you will see we do have, as part of the cubicles at OR Tambo, Kinshaka, Cape Town, Beitbridge, Libombo, Maseru Bridge, Fixburg, Caldon Sport, or even Oshu, wherever. We have tables where we are busy piloting that. So as we speak, oh, by the way, if you remember, we issued some statistics quite lately. Let's say, for example, we talk about the 3,008 that we intercepted just in the 10 days. 2,100 were intercepted because they had no documents at all. But 1,090 or so were actually intercepted at the port because they were declared undesirable before. Declared undesirable means if we arrest you in South Africa for being here illegally, we take your fingerprint, we then, in the biometric movement control system, declare you undesirable. You are banned from re-entering the country for 5 years, then you leave. If you come with a proper passport later and you try to come through, we take the fingerprint as you come through, the system says, you are still in your 5th year of being undesirable. Maybe you are on your 3rd year, there is 2 years to go. We then reject you. It's because of the biometric movement control system. So the reason why we have more interceptions now is primarily because the system is working. Now, the real question is what you are asking about. What have we done to do all the issues of avoiding people hacking it? No, the IT people just told me there is a firewall. I don't know what it means. But what I know, they say there is something that is going to stop that. So I am not an IT guru. So maybe we might need to engage more to get to understand what is that. But they just say there is something that they have put to make sure it is not penetrated. And they do what is called penetration testing with some people from state security on our biometric movement control system. Because remember, that system, we call it BMCS. It links into the Home Affairs Population Register. It links into the Home Affairs refugee system for all the people who are even in asylum status. It also links to the system where people apply for visas. So all these systems are linked, because when you get to the airport, we need to check if the visa is valid. We need to check if you are South African. We need to check if you are an asylum seeker in the you are a refugee in the Republic and all. So all the systems are linked. The IT people just told me there is firewall, relax. So I don't know, but we'll work more on that.
Thank you so much. A round of applause for the Commissioner. Thank you so much. Mrs. Khoza, DCA, I understand you have an item.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. I think this engagement was absolutely necessary so that we have an appreciation of what is happening in our air border lines, as it were. And I remember that when we had our first engagement, I think it speaks back to the question that was raised by my colleague Pierre. We spent almost the whole afternoon engaging on your jurisdiction, how your functions fit within the bigger picture. And I actually said to myself, it's important if the aviation community were to really understand what is going on in terms of the new things that are coming, which as a South African, it makes me to be even more patriotic about the work that the Border Management Authority is doing. And please, please continue, because this as a country is what we need. There is a lot of lawlessness in our country, especially in our border or in our ports, and it can only take decisive leadership, and that you are demonstrating. And thank you so much to you and your team. And here's a token of appreciation from all of us. I'm not sure, Charmaine, about this one in Pindi, because these ones I normally see ladies, women carrying them. So, but hopefully they are going to be useful to the madam at home, perhaps. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And we look forward to even more collaboration and cooperation with you. I shared with the Commissioner about the confusion that we witnessed during COVID, having to deal with a multitude of stakeholders, from the Department of Health to Port Health to this one and that one. Confusing and frustrating, because the Minister had given us a responsibility to oversee the COVID, the movements, and be responsible for the drafting of those regulations and so on, and it was quite a tedious process. I so wish you existed at that time, because I'm sure a lot of things would have been, dealt with smoothly. So thank you, and we do appreciate you. Maybe a last round of applause to the Commissioner. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Commissioner. Once again, happy birthday to the Border Management Authority for celebrating 4 years since inception in 2020. Thank you so much for that engaging and insightful presentation you gave us. And I think at the heart of it, Commissioner, is already collaboration in the room. There's a call already to collaborate with you, whether it's from a cybersecurity point of view or collaboration more with what you're doing at ports of entries and borders. So let's continue, of course, with that charge to make a difference within the aviation aviation industry. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this is where I say goodbye for day one of the National Aviation Conference. I think so much came out from our presentations, and I'd like to say thank you so much to today's speakers, our panelists, for engaging in those thought-provoking panel discussions. Thanks to you as well for engaging on Mentimeter, but also sending through your questions. I've been tagged in a few pictures as well. Thank you for also engaging on social media. We continue once again tomorrow, and this time around we'll of course be welcoming onto the stage the chairperson of the board at the South African Civil Aviation, and also the Deputy Minister of Transport, that's Lisa Mangu. The Honourable Minister will be joining us, as well as the captains of industry that I look forward to engaging with them during our panel discussions, and more panels that of course will be fruitful and impactful, including the one that as well was mentioned around mental health, which I think is important in understanding and embedding that healthier employees and staff members and cabin crew and even the general public, customers, clients are important in making this industry successful and healthy as well. So thank you for joining us for day one. I look forward to seeing you on day two, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye.